Wasn't that pretty? You know, when we hear people sing or play instruments, we can say, I wish I could do that. But it's a good thing we don't. God's given us gifts. And what we want to do is maximize them. Wouldn't that be right to say? And God doesn't put all of his eggs in one basket. Excuse me for saying this, when they were making the introduction, sometimes they'll say to me, what do you want us to say? I'll say as little as possible. Because, listen to me, when you put somebody up, you're pulling somebody down. And so you could say, well, Ophel this or another one that. What about the carpenter that's here? What about the electrician? What about whatever it is? And I've said since I've been here that if you're a nobody, when you're outside the church, you come here to this church, you're a somebody. And if you're a somebody outside, you come here, then you're a nobody. What's that noise going on behind me? I don't know what. Watch out, there's a shock here. You know, it's interesting how we use these electronic things. And you know how they put the big screens out on the side? And I don't particularly like that. You know, I can see where it would be necessary. But when that happens and the picture's out on the outside, I start looking at the outside. And the speaker's in the middle. So I was in some camp meeting. And they had those things on the outside. I'd say, talk to me, I'm live. And that's the way we do, we'll talk to the outside. Anyway, what a blessing to be here. And may I just talk to you as your grandpa for just a minute? I'm going to talk about the Sabbath, but I like to just get acquainted, because, preaching is invasive. When a preacher starts to preach, in their minds, who's he? What's going on? I'm not sure I want to hear him. And anyway, it takes a few minutes to warm up and to get confidence in what's about to be said. So I usually warm up. Now there's another thing that's an advantage to being my age. And I'm not going to tell you how old I am unless you're a mathematician. I was born in 40. Anyway, when you get to be my age, you're everybody's grandpa. So I can say what I want to whoever I want to say it. And I told you yesterday the advantage is they call you honey and sweetheart and all the rest. But they wouldn't do that if you were 45. But I think Betty gets embarrassed. I'll just start talking to anybody right out of the blue. And you know what I found? I'll talk to cashiers in a store or something. And I even said to them before, they're not treated as people, but as part of the account, the machine you give your money to. And I found when you say something friendly to them, that they'll smile, that they're human beings, not just a fun tooth. Have you seen my wife, Betty?
Yes.
Isn't she sweet? Betty, stand up and show us who you are. She hates it when I do this. Stand up. Isn't that nice? She's, that woman, God bless me so much. So much. She's what I needed, and of course that's what we wanted to be. I was telling yesterday how she's generous and I'm stingy. Remember that story I told? And God brought her into my life, not for me to make her like me, but to bring somebody in my life that I needed to have. And I think we need that in our experience. By the way, I have a new ministry and I'm now one of the greeters. When you see me ring my eye, you know what's coming next is a joke. And I'm a greeter in my church. You know how the greeters shake hands? Well, my hands just shake automatically. So I'll just stick them out there when the person comes in. They stick their hand in my hand and I shake it. Isn't that a nice thing to do? But I was saying, you know, with what I have a couple of things. I'm not saying I wouldn't or there's anything wrong with it, but I've thought to myself, I would like to pray that the Lord would heal me. There's no cure for what I've got. It gets worse and worse. And somebody said it's the gift that never stops taking. And so I can see myself, God forbid, in a wheelchair, or the next time you see me with a cane and so forth. But anyway, I'm thinking to myself, should I ask God to heal me? Well, I'd sure like to do that, but why would he heal me and leave the others sick? Am I better than all the rest of the people? You understand what I'm saying? So I don't talk much about that to the Lord. I pray for compassion. Because, you know, if you see a blind person, you don't think much about it. Don't misunderstand me. Blind people are all over the place, so we look at them. Or a person in a wheelchair, you look at it. But I want to tell you, when I look at blind people and wheelchair people, I feel it. Because I'm one of them. And anyway, it's not an easy thing. And another thing I pray for, and I don't think it's selfish, I pray for strength to bear the cross, which I must bear.
Amen.
And of course it makes the coming of Jesus more meaningful to me. Of course, if you're 75 years old, the coming of Jesus it's really near. I've already used up my allotment. You know, when you get to be 70, that's about the end of the line. I notice some of you 70-year-olds are starting to, you know, look depressed. Not really, not really. I think I told you yesterday, for those who weren't here, how I had a cataract surgery. Anyway, it's simple these days. Remember back in the old days, they put your head in a pillow and all that, and you had to keep stiff. But anyway, I'm laying on the operating table, and you know me, I kind of, you know, smile and joke around, and the doctors and the nurses were around me, and I'm carrying on with them. And then I say to them, when are you going to put me to sleep? And they say, we already have. No, seriously. And there I was talking and joking. They put me to sleep, and I didn't know I'd been asleep, and that was awake. That's the resurrection. Boy, did that comfort me. In the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. And by the way, those of us who go beforehand, we get a privilege. We get to go first. Isn't that right? Dead in Christ shall what? Rise first, and then the ones that remain. Let me tell you something else. Can I continue with the warm-up here just a few minutes? I forgot what it was, Betty. She forgot that part. It'll come to me. You know, when you get to be our age, you could say that I'm having a senior moment. But really, we people, we remember everything we've ever done. We just don't know what file it's in. You understand that? So, in fact, I was praying for my grandchildren. I have 4 of them. And if you don't have grandchildren yet, call your married children in and say, honey, you owe me. I don't want money back. But anyway, Betty and I were praying. And it came the time for me to pray. And I forgot the name of my grandchildren. And so I just prayed for the little children down the street. And by the way, if you don't pray, in a sermon that I preach about the Christian home, I realized one day that I was praying with anybody and everybody, with anything and everything. If you'd said to me, go pray with a piano, I just kind of wondered what I was going about. Yes. See, we ministers are paid to pray. Go pray with the piano. All right. In other words, phone rings. Hello, Pastor O'Bill. Would you pray for me? Yes, ma'am. Now, I'm just, I'm exaggerating. But I realized one day that I was praying with anybody and everybody and anything and everything, but I wasn't praying with Betty. Now don't misunderstand me, I was praying before we ate but to just pray, listen to me fellas, just with her out loud, just the two of us. We prayed with the children, we had our family worship, but just the two of us to pray out loud. We men have a hard time being spiritual. Have you noticed that, fellas? Our wives are many times the spiritual leaders in our home. And they're filling in a vacuum. And so I've started some years ago praying with Betty out loud. When you pray out loud, you say things that it brings you closer together. It's not sexy, but it bonds us. So if husband and wife, now I know that the people who are here would be inclined to do that. But if you don't pray out loud with your wife, not with the kids there, just the two of you, if you don't do that when you do that. And now I know what happens if you don't do that. You go, why not when you go home to your home after the camp meeting? Come time to go to bed, you say to your wife, well, shall we? Well, the pastor said maybe we ought to. Let's do it. When I first started that, it was a little embarrassing, even though I'm a minister paid to pray. So fellas, if you don't pray with your wife, do that. Okay, I've got some information that I've just written down before I go to the regular sermon. Oh, by the way, I have a website. I noted it's revivalsermons.org. It has 70 sermon manuscripts that I've done through the years. There's a series on, for example, on holiness, on godliness. And I have a tendency, because it's meaningful to me, towards the practical Christian life. I don't speak Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic, but I do want my life to be for Jesus. You know, what I don't want to happen is that I come to church and I shake your hand and saying, welcome to church, we're so glad to see you. While my wife Betty sat in the back said, shut your mouth. I wish they knew the way you really are. Some people come to church and to Sabbath school and they're not the same people that they were when they left home. And so that's doing damage to us. So I want to be the kind of person, not that's perfect, but the kind of person that Betty can look at me and say, he's not perfect, but he wants to be. Isn't that right? Amen. Let's do that so that we don't show up as a hypocrite, albeit unspoken, to our family and to our children. Is there anything else? Yes, sir. Here I go. And let's don't say, I mentioned this week, that the church has apostatized. Now, lots of things are going on in the church, many really tough, serious things. But it's not my father and my mother, but who is it? It's me, O Lord. Listen, the church hasn't apostatized because I haven't apostatized, have you? So have some apostatized? Yes. Have you apostatized? I hope no. Has the church apostatized then? No. Some have, but by God's grace, we haven't and we won't. Does that make sense? Be careful how you treat the church. You know, about some years ago, the Florida conference where I work, which was one of the most fiscally healthy, very large conference, really big, it began to have financial problems, a serious one, and so it decided it was going to let go 50 workers. I was going to let go 25 in the office and 25 pastors. I was one of the 25 in the office, and I mean, it wasn't just me, and I wasn't fired. They just collapsed what was that department? We called it home missionary, but it's, anyway, they collapsed my department and the others. I hate to say this, can I confess something to you? I wanted to remain. You know what I'm saying? It's that neat cake. And I thought, well, I hope that they continue with their financial problems. That'll get even with them. That'll teach them what not to do. But one day I realized this is heresy. For me to wish that evil upon the Church of God is pure rebellion and of the devil.
Amen.
So what the church needs is our prayer. We need to pray for ourselves. In fact, I say to people, I've had a blessing in my ministry because I'm a very conservative person, but the people know that I'm loyal. I'm a loyal son of the church. And that's what I want to challenge you. Be loyal sons and daughters of the church. It may not be going like we would pray that it would go, but it's going. And let's not figure that the whole Adventist church is in Ohio or in Florida. Listen, it's in Africa, it's in Asia, it's everywhere. What's going on maybe here is not going on everywhere. Let's not treat everybody as if they were us.
Amen.
Does that make sense? We've got to do that. Don't talk about the church in its global sense. It's all over the place, and it's not like maybe some troubles. I was in Latin America, in Mexico, and I said to them, don't import anything from North America. Don't do it because we don't have much good to offer. Because thank God that in Latin America the work's going like crazy. In fact, up here in the States, we talk about the church in the States being one of the fastest growing churches. And then you know that what they're, that's the Latin church. That's the Latin church, and that's the West Indian church. The Caucasians are disappearing. And they're worried about how to get that. And one of the things they're using is some of these far out things. Some of the leaders of our church are going crazy to win white people, if I can say it that way. So they're bringing in all kinds of weird worship things. I feel very strongly about worship tendencies in so many churches. From the very beginning, I have been, I'm going to use the word enemy of the new worship style. And I put this into my preaching and everywhere. But they know I'm a loyal son of the church. So I can say those things and get away with it. And I told you when you're a grandpa, you get away with lots of stuff. Anyway, I've written this down, what you think. There are those who teach that it's okay to worship God according to your culture. The stories recorded in the Old Testament say no. Sacred history is clear that to do it your way or my way or their way is not necessarily God's way. When God took offense at homegrown worship styles in the Old Testament, the results were hardly accepting. Just because we haven't seen the ground open up doesn't mean that God is pleased with the worship styles that are growing amongst us. I remember one time the conference president said, Dick, we want you to go to Willow Creek. And I said to him, why are you sending me to Willow Creek? You know what that's about. You know how I feel about it. He said, we're sending it to get another point of view. And anyway, I'm disappointed with those who feel that we need to go to the brethren on the outside. And I say brethren, because there's so many honest and hard out there. I told you how when I was a boy, I thought if you ate a hamburger, you didn't love Jesus. I thought that. But we realized, I've been in an airport where they pray before they eat. And I thought, thank God we're not the only one. Isn't that nice to know that? And by the way, let me just say this before I go on. If someone asks you what Seventh-day Adventists are like, tell them what we have in common before you tell them the difference. We start out by saying that we're born-again Christians. That's where you start.
Amen.
You know, normally we want to say, what's it like to be a Seventh-day Adventist? Well, we keep Saturday. Hold it back. Don't do that. Anyway, does that make sense to you?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Sometimes with my little hands doing this, I can't read my own writing. Here's an experience I had when Betty and I were in Bermuda. I was going to preach like I am today, and I'm setting up the front there, and I see there's a fellow set with a set of drums over here. And the fellow sitting beside me, that was his dad. And I whispered to him, who was the head elder in the church, I said, tell your dad not to play the drum. And I told you can do that when you get to be white hair. And so he went over and whispered to his dad, and his dad didn't play the drums. That was Sabbath school time, but listen to me. It came time to preach, and there they had put a jazz band. And the fellow that was doing the drums happened to be the pastor. I didn't stand up and stop it. It was on the way. But I couldn't believe we were having a jazz band in church. So what I did when I stood up to preach, I said, let's pray. And I said, God, forgive us for using a jazz band. I said that out loud. And you can imagine when they shook hands at the door. You know, some said, thank you, Jesus, and others, I'm sure, didn't have much to say. The rock rhythms, by the way, are sexy. They're essential. And they can talk about the words. Listen, I'll tell you, it's not the words that make something religious or non-religious, it's the rhythms. Like someone has said, in a dentist's waiting room, you don't have the music for some kind of a murder mystery. You know what I mean? It's like Frankenstein show is not played in the... Don't tell me that the words are everything. In fact, the thing that carries a song is the melody. In fact, I say that I can see rhythm where you tap your foot. You know, you got to keep the words from finishing before the music side does. But have you noticed, even in church, it'll be swaying. And then I say this: you don't worship God with your pelvis, because that's what's going on. Anyway, God have mercy on us. I'm moving toward the sermon. I'm not there yet, but let me say this. Oh, you know, one of the reasons why the rock and roll is getting into some churches is because that rock and roll is played at home. It's played at home. In other words, what we're beginning to do in some places is we're bringing the way we are at home to church. Back in the old days, I can talk about the old days because I was there. Anyway, back in the old days, you went to church to find out how to live a Christian life. Then you went home and by God's grace, you lived it the best you could. Now we take the way we are at home, we take it to church, and it's awful what's going on. You know what I mean? It's not right. Anyway, the sermon's ready to go. You know, in the West Indian churches, they have a thing that they use when they start the worship service. And they call it affirmation of faith. Have you heard them do that before? That is, they stand up together and they repeat the fourth commandment. You like that? I'm going to do this little thing that makes my mouth not so dry. You know, some medicine, well, one of the first things they do is dry your mouth. Here goes. Close your eyes. It's better now. Anyway, let's stand and affirm our faith. Fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in it, and rested on the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Amen. May be seated. Well, by the way, Betty and I have had some experiences over in Europe some places, in Russia, one place. Whenever they read scripture, everybody stands. The minister starts reading a text, everybody stands. I like that. You know what I mean? That shows some reverence for the Word of God. Anyway, the Sabbath. I was talking to a man one day, a young man, when he became a Seventh-day Adventist, he lost his job. That used to be much more common than before, because the laws would go to a 6-day work week. But how many times, I was talking to a young man who spent his first day sleeping in his car. I never had to do that. You know, unfortunately, in some places, modern evangelism is playing down the Sabbath. Now that doesn't mean they don't preach the seventh day, and it doesn't mean that those who are baptized don't believe in the seventh day. But I think I don't want to say generally, how to honor the Sabbath is not being taught. Accept the Sabbath, believe in the Sabbath, but learn how to honor it, keep it. The people that are being baptized. In fact, one fellow said to me, nobody told us how to keep the Sabbath, so we just winged it. I was talking with a friend of mine who was a Bible worker, and she said one Sabbath afternoon, she went to visit a family that had just been baptized. And when she walked in the door, they were unloading the groceries. I mean, we're talking about, 5 bags of groceries from Kroger. And they didn't run and hide. They talked and just kept going with the unloading the food. And then, of course, the subject came up, and they said, nobody told us that. In fact, unfortunately, there's a new twist to Sabbath keeping in lots of places. And that's what I call creative Sabbath keeping. And that's maybe going out to eat. And of course, some women will tell you that going out to eat makes for better Sabbath keeping because they don't have to wash the dishes or cook. I know some people that go to the beach on Sabbath. Now, I'll tell you, the beach is not a good place to go the rest of the week. It's pornographic. It's pornographic. Now, I'm not saying we wouldn't walk along the beach and see the shell, but we do well not to go over there to where the people are swimming. Here I'm going to go, and you're going to say I'm a dirty old man, but I don't know why women seem to persist in taking their clothes off.
Amen.
The first mark of sin was they lost their clothes. And the first act of salvation was that God put them back on.
Amen.
So anyway, I was sitting at a dinner table, and there was a young wife there. And I don't know what brought up the subject. And she said, I want to be attractive. What was the word, Betty? It was attractive, or she should be my coach. She's just sitting there sleeping. No, she's not. That woman takes care of me with my problem. Boy, she's wonderful, understanding, and helpful. And I thank God for her.
Amen.
Anyway, what was I saying? I'll say that sometimes on purpose. Check you out, see where you're at. So it serves two reasons. It checks to see if you're awake, and it helps me out in trying to remember what we're talking about. Creative, going to the beach and going out to eat. The Sabbath is slipping. It's slipping even amongst, in our church, it could disappear. If I dare say that. And the word that'll make the Sabbath almost break, if not break, in many hearts will be the word legalism. That's what breaks it. In fact, if you want to talk about holy living, someone is very likely to throw the word judgmental in your face. What are you, judgmental? What are you, legalist? Well, I said earlier in the week, I said a person who, with all their heart, wants to do the will of God is not a legalist. You should tell them that. You got to be kidding. To want to do the will of God as a legalist, forget it. And this word judgmental. Listen, if I'm walking along and a guy comes running out of a bank with a bag of money in one hand and with a gun in the other, and I say, catch the thief, I'm not being judgmental. I'm being discerning. And so we've got to, in these last days, we've got to learn through the Word of God to discern between right and wrong, don't you think? Anyway, let me see where I'm at in this thing. Oh, I was talking about the Sabbath maybe at risk with the word legalism. Anyway, if somebody asks you how you keep the Sabbath, I'm guessing, or I hate to use the word bet. I'm not saying bet, I'm saying bet. And I'll bet that you'll tell them what you don't do. How do you keep the Sabbath? I don't do this, and I don't do that, and I don't do this. What do you do? We're going to talk about that a little bit during this talk. For many, the Sabbath has become a red light. In their Christian experience, they're going down the highway. And pretty soon, it was a red light. For some people, they're weak on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And have you noticed that when you drive your car and you're going somewhere and the light turns red, you spend that time looking at your watch. And for many people, when Sabbath comes, unfortunately, they spend the time looking at their watch. In fact, that's happened in your church. There's going to be a social, and they'll say, well, it's still Sabbath. It's still Sabbath. Give me a break. What's the message? Still Sabbath. I was attending an evangelistic meeting when I was in Chile, in South America. And the subject during that night was going to be the Sabbath. And it was interesting. I had never seen this done before, but the title of the sermon was Adam's Mother's Birthday. Can you imagine that?
No.
Who was Adam's mother?
God.
Mother, the earth. Anyway, he had brought the dirt. He had brought a cake. And as he talked about what was made on each day, he stuck a candle in there. And when he came to Sabbath, he stuck a candle. It was Adam's mother's birthday. And I thought, well, I've never seen such a thing like that. But then I got to thinking about birthday cake. Can we say that the Sabbath is Adam's mother's birthday? Because my birthday, who's your birthday about?
You.
It's about you. So when I talk about, I'll say next week's my birthday. By the way, Betty and I have our birthday on the same day, don't we? Some of you who are here this week remember when it was, don't you? September 16th. What about those of you who are just visiting today? Write that down. But remember what I said yesterday, we're not the same age? One of us is older than the other? No, just 1 year. She may look old, but she's not that old. No, I think she's pretty, don't you think she's pretty? I won't have her stand up again. But the birthday is for me. And I thought, an anniversary. I said, that's what the Sabbath is. The Sabbath is not a birthday, it's an anniversary. Because an anniversary is for us, not me. And you know how long Betty and I have been married? Hang on. 55 years.
Praise God.
Oh, no, come on, don't say that. I promise till death do us part. Save that amen till my funeral. Anyway, anniversaries are for married people. The world doesn't need the Sabbath. The world needs Jesus. Get that straight. Once you get Jesus, you get the Sabbath. Just like when I married Betty, I got June 19 as our anniversary. When Jesus is the Lord of your life, you get the Sabbath. Because He is the Lord of the Sabbath. Anniversaries come once a year. God knows that we need special time with Him more often. In reality, the Sabbath is not a red light. It's a destination. You know, life is cut into pieces, 7 pieces at a time. When we get to the place where we're honoring the Sabbath the way we should, the way we will, God willing, the way we are, you can't have an ulcer out of that, can you, doctor? You can't, because you're resting every Sabbath. You're laying it down. You can say, I can't wait till Sabbath comes. I can relax and so forth. How can we get the most out of the Sabbath? Well, the answer I've written down here in point number 18. My points are shorter. They're not too long, are they? Did you ever hear the story I told you about the fellow over in Montana? Sunday morning he went to church, and at 9 o'clock for Sunday school, and nobody came. And then 11 o'clock came for the preaching service, and still nobody came. About 11:15, he figured there's been some whatever. I think I'll get my things together and go home. But just then, the door opened, and a cowboy. Have you been in those ranch places that they still wear cowboy boots and those hats? Anyway, that cowboy walked in the door, threw his hat on the pew, and sat down. The minister looked at him and smiled. Then he went down to where the cowboy was sitting, and he said, "Well, brother, what should we do? We're the only one." And the cowboy said, "Well, if I went out to the field and only one cow came, I'd feed her."
Amen.
What are you going to say? So he went back, listen to me, he went back up to the pulpit, and he had the whole business, kind of like we do. This camp meeting is on the clock. And anyway, he went through the whole thing, and he preached for an hour and a half. And then he had the closings of the works, and then he marched down the aisle, to say goodbye to the people. The cowboy had his hat in his hand, took the pastor's hand and said, "Pastor, as I was saying, if I went out to the field with a load of hay and only one cow came, I would feed her. But I wouldn't feed her the whole load." And that's what we get in sermons sometimes. We want to say, does this sermon have an end? Anyway, so the only reason I told you that was because I said I have points for this sermon and they're short. Anyway, how do we get the most out of Sabbath? Got to follow the question, how do you get the most out of an anniversary? Betty was raised in Orlando. And this makes me, what can I say? She had boyfriends before me. And one of them's name was Jim Lilly. I can say that because he's not here. And you know something, through the years, Jim has come to visit us. I'm telling you the truth. In fact, he's taken us out to eat. And we've had him over. But you know something? There was a time that we would never have Jim over. In other words, can you imagine me saying, well, next week is our anniversary. Why don't you get your old boyfriend and I'll get my girlfriend and we'll go out there and eat. It's all right for Jim to come and see you on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and all right up. But you don't have him on your anniversary. In the same way, you can do most any good thing the rest of the week, but you don't do it on Sabbath.
Amen.
because it's an anniversary time. You know, the two things that I feel in my experience that make the Sabbath a delight, I've written down here. One is to plan for it. You know, if you ask me even now, say, what are you going to do on Monday? I can tell you, because I've planned for this next week. So if the Sabbath is going to be a blessing to us, dear one, we're going to have to plan for it before it gets here.
Amen.
And another thing we're going to need to do, and that is get ready for it. You know, before I talk about that, you know, my daddy was a minister. And you know what it was to be an Adventist back in those days? Listen, what you didn't eat mustard. You didn't use vinegar, you remember that? Coca-Cola, of course, was out. You didn't read the funny paper. Of course, you didn't listen to jazzy music. My dad wouldn't let me listen to these murder mysteries. And of course, we didn't eat meat. Anyway, but I'm glad for that. That's who I am. I mean, I'm not kicking myself and I leave the church and all that, you know, and said, I was growing in a minister's home and I'm out of here. No, that's who I am. As I told him the other day, I still haven't had a hamburger and I don't resent it. I had a bottle of Coke one time and it was, you know, I was in Pakistan and somebody in the market gave it to me. I didn't know what to say. But they gave me another kind of drink one time. There was a fly floating around it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and I have a Seventh-day Adventist lifestyle from the generation which I've come. I'm thinking that the Seventh-day Adventist lifestyle is diminishing. It's diminishing. It's becoming something of the head. We believe it, but we got to get around it somewhere. Anyway, talking about getting ready for Sabbath. For some wives are working, the husband and wife are working, and some work right up to the sunset. In fact, some have said there in the Orlando area they ought to have vespers at the supermarket. And it can do that. Betty and I have discovered that getting ready for the Sabbath makes it a bigger blessing.
Amen.
We've got 4 children, and our oldest one is Cindy, and she comes to visit us. You know, Betty will clean that guest room till the cows come home. I mean, you'd think we live in that room was messy before she cleaned it, knowing it had already been dusted who knows how many times. But she wants to be ready when Cindy comes. And if Cindy tells us that the airplane's going to come at 3 o'clock, guess when we're there? 1:30. That's the way mothers are and grandma. Listen, to get a blessing from the Sabbath, be there when it comes.
Amen.
You see, that means it's not on our back. It's not a red light. It's a joy. In fact, now I don't mean to use the wrong example, but the best part of Christmas is Christmas Eve. Am I right on that? The joy of Sabbath is Friday night when we're ready for it and it comes and we sing, you know, and don't forget that whatever we do. We have a custom that we've gotten years ago, and that is we have a special meal on Friday night. And for a long time we used our best china. And our best stainless steel. You thought I was going to say silver, didn't you? Our best stainless steel. And you know what we had now, if you're a nutritionist, just close your ears. We have pizza every Friday night for years and years. And we have, here I go again, close your ears. We have root beer. All these years. Pizza, root beer, and pudding. And, don't be mad at me. I'm a loyal son of the church. And anyway, you know, it's easier to be a vegan than it is to be nice to your wife. The Buddhists and the Hindus are vegans. Don't forget that. If you're going to make the nutrition the center of your life, don't do that. Man shall not live by bread alone, even if it's vegan. Are you with me on that? Am I an enemy of healthful living? You would say yeah, because you have root beer on Friday night. But anyway, we had that special meal. We had the music playing in the distance, the Sabbath music. No, Friday night in honoring the Sabbath is not a big problem. It's kind of, we get ready for it even if you have to start on Thursday. And then you're ready for it when it comes on Friday. Sabbath morning's taken care of because you go to Sabbath school in church. Unfortunately, in many churches, Sabbath school is diminishing. In other words, they go into the Sabbath school lesson. I think in the church where I go there, they have the lesson for an hour. Betty's a superintendent. How long do they give you, Betty? 15 minutes? Listen, the Sabbath school used to be the big event for a young... Did you see those kids sing? Boy, that was the joy of it. We'd have special programs. We'd have a mission story. When's the last time your church had a mission story? Oh no, Sabbath was the time we thought of missions. The Sabbath school class was big. They even took the record. They'd ask you if you passed out any literature this week. Guess what you did, man? You passed it out. But you see what happened, in my way of thinking, is that we started to... Sabbath school came down to its lowest level. In other words, we said, well, you can't ask anybody how many times they studied. They'll be offended. No, be offended. Be offended, but that can have an inspiration. And so to me, they were going to ask me how many times I studied the lessons, so guess what I did? I studied it. They would be, are you with me on that? No, we've got to set a standard if we're going to improve, but to dumb it down just doesn't make sense. And I think in many places we can do a lot more to make the Sabbath a delight. Sabbath afternoon is a problem, especially for mothers who have children. It's a problem for us. You know what I used to do on Sabbath afternoon? Sleep. And do you sleep, you fellas? The fella on the front row here sleeping already. Let's see what his eyes. Listen, brother, why don't you paint your eyes open on your eyelid? No, my wife tells me not to do that. Yesterday I overdid it with Jim, but he and I are brothers. You what on Sabbath afternoon?
Listen to Stephen Ford.
Leaving to Stephen Ford. He's live here. Haven't those been good?
Yeah.
Listen, I was thinking when I walked up here this morning, I can't think of, in other words, if you were at Carolina camp meeting, which is thousands, I don't think it would be any better than this has been to you. This has been really good. But anyway, the Sabbath afternoon is hard, especially for mothers with small children. You know, Betty, with our 4 children, used to have Sabbath toys. And I don't mean Monster Man. Back in those days, it could have been little Tinker Toys or something like that. But it was only for Sabbath. Only for Sabbath. And by the way, Betty did something else too that, I don't know if you've tried it, you mother. With those 4 children, when I was preaching, she would sit on the front row with those little children. And they acted better on the front row than they did on the back row. No, it's true. Wasn't it true, Betty? They did. Anyway, Sabbath afternoon is hard. And we got to plan it in advance. You see, if you don't plan Sabbath afternoon in advance, it gets away from you. Have you found that in your own life? You know, another thing, speaking of a red light, many people are watching. Well, we've done it. Have you done it? You know, you're waiting for the Sabbath, the sun to go down. So, you know, the sun goes down, just goes skidding down the highway. But we shouldn't run away from the Sabbath, we should walk away. Or maybe crawl away. And I remember I was down in Puerto Rico at the college there, and there was a group singing "Day is Dying in the West." Remember that? We used to sing that all the time, but it's kind of slipped on us to sing that. Betty and I decided we need to do more to honor the Sabbath. Just over the years it slipped. We still go to church on Saturday. Betty's a Sabbath school superintendent. I'm a preacher, but there's so much more to the Sabbath than what you don't do. Betty and I got ready for this trip coming down here. You'd think we were going around the world in 80 days. We really got ready for it, but getting ready for the Sabbath deserves it. It's God's day. I've written down here, there remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. Therefore, let us be diligent to enter into that rest. What do you say? I wish we had somebody to play Don't Forget the Sabbath. Are they here? Don't forget the Sabbath. Can you play that song? Here she is. Here she goes. You know the words to that? Let's just kind of wing it. Can we do that? No, am I supposed to enter finish this by having a prayer or something? Am I the one that does that?
You are.
Okay, then what we'll do is stand and sing Don't Forget the Sabbath, and then I'll have a prayer. Will that be all right? Father, we look forward to the time when we go to church that you're there. And that we'll be gathered around you singing. We'll be gathered around with you talking to us. Oh Lord, we look forward to that time. You, oh Jesus, who have begun this work in our lives, finish it, we pray. In your name, amen.
Amen.